Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Marketing with Purpose, How to Stand Out from the Competition with Roger Burnett. Today, you are listening using your computer speaker system by default. You'll have the opportunity to submit questions to Roger by typing them into the questions pane on the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time. We will collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end. As co-founder of Promo Cares and Promo Kitchen, host of the popular So You're in Sales podcast, executive producer of the Promo Cares radio podcast, and co-author of the book Red Goldfish, Promo Edition Roger offers a unique perspective on the many values of organisational alignment and the ways purpose capably serves them as the fifth P of marketing. Roger is a founder of Social Good Promotions, a social enterprise built to teach and deliver purpose-based marketing strategies to businesses of all sizes, while also donating marketing services to non-for-profit organisations in the communities they serve. Self-designated #Goodness Warriors, So Good employees connect commerce with purpose to help companies tell the story of their brand, using promotional marketing campaigns, creating lead generating virtual and in-person events, and performing sales and marketing consulting for businesses looking to improve results. A long-time volunteer leader, Roger is widely recognised as a volunteer organisation thought leader, guiding non-for-profit organisation leadership through transformative periods of growth and providing new levels of member engagement to those being served by those organisations. I will now hand this over to Roger.
Oh, thanks so much. I really appreciate that. I, too, have been an association member for the majority of my time in the promotional marketing industry. So for those of you who are here today as a means by which to educate and improve and sharpen your skill set, I say bravo. I always am really proud to be a part of a community of people who are trying to elevate our marketing medium in comparison to the other ways that businesses might spend money to grow their own perspective in the marketplace. So cheers to all of you for your willingness to improve yourself at such an early stage of your day. It is after dinner time here in Michigan, and so I'm also taking a little bit extra time to participate. And to Robert Williams, cheers, my friend. I'm glad that you're here paying attention and along for the ride. That's great to hear and see. So I had the very good fortune to co-author Red Goldfish Promo Edition with my good friend Stan Phelps. Stan is a prolific writer. There are 16 Goldfish books in the series. Many of them are in their 2.0 updated version. And as you can see here, they span a number of colors. There's even some precious metals in there along the way. And each of them cover a different organizational discipline under the concept of the goldfish, which we will describe and explain to you during the course of this presentation. But we will get down specifically to Red Goldfish and what that book means specifically both to me, as well as a way that it might serve as a competitive differentiator for you against your competition in the marketplace, and also as a means by which to help your customers and prospects figure out how they can stand out in their own crowded and noisy and difficult marketplaces. Because today, regardless of what you sell, the means by which to do that has become challenging and hard and all of the things that we know it to be. So your customers are also looking for a leg up over their competition. And if you can learn some of the disciplines that I'll share with you today by virtue of the Goldfish series, you might be able to then share that with your customers in a way that elevates your trustworthiness with them in a way that maybe sets you apart from your competition. So a little bit about me: certified advertising specialist through PPAI. As I just said, I've been the host of the So You're in Sales podcast for going on 4 years now, and we are approaching 20,000 listens of that show over the course of those 4 years. So I'm very proud of that. And it was during my time in Promo Kitchen, which is an industry nonprofit that is dedicated to the education and mentorship of professionals within the organization who are seeking to elevate their own use of the promotional marketing medium against their competition, that I was able to forge some friendships that have really been long lasting and very, very valuable to me. And in that process, one of the relationships that I was able to forge was with my good friend, Danny Rosen. And it was in my time commiserating with Danny that Promo Cares was launched back in January of 2018. And really the sole purpose of Promo Cares was to recognize and elevate those businesses here in the United States that were using the promotional marketing medium as a way to elevate what it is that we do. And we really spent much of those first couple of years trying to find those businesses and tell their stories in a way that would be meaningful to other practitioners in the space, so that if you were inspired by what you heard, maybe you too would want to adopt some of those strategies. And it was in that entire process that I was able to then happen upon the book, which was really, really just an amazing opportunity for me. And I've been a speaker in the industry. I often will participate at PPAI education days, as you can see there in the lower right-hand corner. And I'm a little bit of a social media guy. As you can see there on the left, me giving a little bed talk on trust on LinkedIn. So if you ever want to find me on any of those social media channels, please look for me. And we'd love to continue the conversation with you through those channels as well. So it was in my time at Promo Cares that I was able to gather up all of the stories that ultimately became the case studies that went into Red Goldfish Promo Edition. But before we get into the specifics of the promotional marketing medium and how purpose is a differentiator, I really want to explain the concept of a goldfish and why Stan thought it would be necessary for us to come up with this concept and have it spawn what is now 16 books. And when Stan was just beginning his speaking career, he happened to bump into Mark Levy, who is known by many as the speaker whisperer. And it was in that encounter that Mark shared a story with Stan about this guy named Ed. And Ed was a financial planner. And for those of you who are not familiar with the ways here in the US that financial planners typically try to get new customers, it's often done through a very interesting process by which you come and you meet with the financial planner and you have a discussion and you share all of everything about what your hopes and dreams and aspirations are. But typically as a means by which to attract new prospects, guys like Ed will employ a strategy whereby you will get a direct mail piece inviting you to a local restaurant that's on the nicer side, promising you a very wonderful dinner, provided that you'll be willing to sit through the presentation. And Ed was a bit frustrated with the results that he was getting and the conversions that he was able to accomplish in what is a relatively expensive way to get new customers. So Mark asked Ed, talk to me about the statistics, like how many people typically will show up to one of your events? And Ed said, well, typically I'll get about 40 people who will come to dinner and sit there and hear the presentation. Mark, of course, asked him then what every salesperson would ask another salesperson, how many of those people then turn into somebody that will come and seek you for a consultation, which Ed shared with him. Typically that will turn about 3 prospects into those appointments and that potential conversion. And then typically that would lead to 1 close. So Ed would, from the expense of the dinner, the time that he would spend, the expense of the night, he would typically get about 1 client. So in that moment, Mark asked Ed a very interesting question. He said, hey, Ed, explain to me why it is that you do what you do for a living. And Ed went on to tell him that because his mother was a single mother, that oftentimes he was raised by his grandparents. And it was in the course of his time with his grandparents that he witnessed his grandfather, in a bolt of excitement, stand up with a newspaper ad in his hand saying to his wife, Meredith, I've figured it out. Here's what we're going to do with our retirement money. We're going to be set. We're going to buy the local butcher shop. And no experience running a butcher shop whatsoever, actually no experience in any kind of sales whatsoever. And ultimately what happened was, in the first year of the business, the butcher shop lost some money. In the second year of the business, it lost a little bit more. And over the course of the next 5 years, Ed's grandparents lost so much money that they ultimately had to declare bankruptcy. And both of his grandparents had to work until the day that they died. And so Ed shared with Mark that the reason why he wanted to be a financial planner was he wanted to make sure that people like his grandparents were never in that situation where they would be forced to have to work until the day they died. It's a really poignant story if you think about it. And, oftentimes we don't really get to the root cause behind why someone does what it is that they do. So Mark made a suggestion to Ed. He said, hey, how long are these presentations typically? And Ed said to him, well, they're about 90 minutes typically. And he said, look, Ed, I'm going to ask you a question. No, I'm going to give you a piece of advice. I want you to reduce the length of the presentation to 85 minutes. And what I want you to do is I want you to spend the first 5 minutes talking to your prospects in the room about the story of your grandparents and the reasons why you decided to become a financial planner. So Ed goes off and does his thing. A period of time passes, and they were fortunate enough to reconnect, which of course, Mark being the typical salesperson that he is, he asked Ed almost immediately. He said, so are you continuing to get the 40 people that you've traditionally gotten using the approach that you've used historically? To which Ed said emphatically, yes, I still am filling the room with about 40 people on average every time I do one of these. And of course, the next question was, how many people are we now converting into potential prospects and in potential customers? I'm going to leave you guys a second here. Throw me out some numbers. What do you think the improvement rate was? What number did we see Ed here or want to share with Mark? Any ideas? People are thinking, music is playing, everyone's waiting for the drum roll. All right, I'll give it to you. 37. 30, so we went from 3 potential prospects and 1 closed client to 37 out of 40. And clearly the reasoning behind this was not necessarily the story that Ed was telling, but it was the reason for what he was doing that was important to the people who were sitting in the room. What we realize is that in many instances, people are not interested in what you're selling. They're interested in the reason behind what it is that you're selling. And I don't know if you know this, but the average close rate for a salesperson in any discipline is about 25%, 1 in 4. And I don't know about you, but sales is hard enough as it is. But to think that you're going to get up every day and perform the activities that are necessary to do what you need to do in order to be successful as a salesperson is a little bit daunting when you know that there's a very good chance that when you wake up tomorrow or today, when you finish this presentation with me, that you're going to go and fail 3 out of 4 times. That's really difficult for most people to try to manage their way through. And it's a big part of the reason why most people are just deathly afraid of a career in sales. And it's because they haven't really identified what it is about what they do that gets them out of bed in the morning. And if you could create a situation where you were able to improve your close rate to something where you were not failing 3 out of 4 times, then the likelihood of you having more passion about doing that job is going to skyrocket. And so it's our assertion through the course of this presentation that if we can awaken some of the reasoning behind why you do what it is that you do, that's the first step in the process. Because remember, people traditionally buy from people they know, like, and trust. And if you only can get about 1 out of 4 people to feel comfortable with you, then there has to be something more for the rest of those 3 people to identify with to give you a better shot at moving beyond just that one person who wants to do business with you because they like how you sound, or they like the way you dress, or they like that you wear reading glasses like I do, or that I have a pretty banner behind me. There's got to be some reason behind that that will improve your opportunity to close that person on what it is that you're doing. And this is pervasive. There's statistics out there like this particular graphic from PricewaterhouseCoopers that suggests that even for your employees, if you're able to communicate to them what it is that your business stands for, and if your employees align with that thing that it is that you've stated to them that you care about, 6 out of 7 of them will stick with you, even in instances where there's an opportunity for them to leave you for more money. There's tremendous amount of case research that shows that in many instances, people will stick around even for less pay if they believe that they are a part of something bigger than themselves. And this doesn't extend to just employees. It's the exact same thing. 6 out of 7 of your customers will stay with you if they believe that your values are in alignment with theirs. And there's some demographics that go along with this that are emerging. Credit to Brand Fuel and the forward author of our book, Danny Rosen, who helped conduct this survey in the Raleigh, North Carolina area. But ultimately, what we're seeing, and especially as a result of what we've seen in the socioeconomic changes that have happened in the last 18 months, this has become increasingly more important to people who are a little bit more wary about throwing their dollars around willy-nilly. They're really wanting to know a lot more about who you are as a business and what you stand for. And they will come to you as employees and they will stay with you as clients if you're able to reliably communicate to them what it is that you stand for. And there was a tipping point that actually occurred in 2020 that is really interesting to note. I don't know if all of you realize this, but we are now at the moment in commerce where there are 5 generations of people who are all competing for jobs. And in 2020 was the first year where millennials, so those aged 27 to 36, actually comprise 51% of the workforce. And what the statistics show is that their rates of engagement around brand values are even higher still than the 86% statistics that I gave you in the previous 2 slides. And what their demands are creating is a seismic shift in the ways that businesses are perceived, because what the historical model has been is either your business or your organization was considered a nonprofit and it was assigned tax status to reflect the fact that your organization is a nonprofit, or you're a capitalistic business and you're a for-profit business. But with changes in the demographics and the demands that are being requested of businesses to speak more about what's happening, it's coupled with this conscious capitalism movement and this CSR acronym that stands for corporate social responsibility, or maybe you've heard it as ESG, and the move towards certification of business status of B corporation or benefit corporation, where literally in the articles of incorporation of your business, you state what it is that your business is meant to support, and your stakeholders and your shareholders in the organization, if you certify as a B corporation, can actually sue you for malfeasance if you don't do what it is that you've said you're going to do in your articles of incorporation. So this movement, this cat is out of the bag. We're seeing a seismic change in the ways that businesses are being evaluated. And we believe that it's more appropriate now, instead of it being for-profit and nonprofit, it's you're either a for-purpose business or you're just a not-for-purpose business. And for those of you who are somewhat skeptical and cynical to this concept, what we would say to you is, this is not necessarily a deal breaker for you, whether or not you're a for-purpose business or not. But what it really opens the door to is if there is a competitor in your space that is actually doing a better job of communicating what their brand values are and what they stand for, and you're not, this could be the key decision-making criteria for a buyer of what you sell if everything else is equal. And if you've not done the work to examine and explain what it is that you stand for, and you're being disrupted in some way, you may find that there is a competitor out there in the marketplace that's doing this to you. And there's been this evolution that's occurred over the course of the last 150 years or so. So dating back to really modern business, I don't know if you're aware of this, but the modern corporation as we know it today really didn't come into play until about the 1870s or so. So for most of the first 150 years of the corporation model, there was really one purpose and one purpose alone. And it was really, really well articulated by Milton Friedman, where he said, our only real responsibility is to engage in activities that will increase our profits. And that's all that really matters. If you hold a share in my business, my job is to maximize your value, no matter what the consequences are to my employees, to the environment, to the community around me. It just doesn't matter. I have one objective and I must pursue that objective absent any consequences. And that held water for a very, very long time. And here in America, we saw in about 1970 or so, an evolution towards being customer centric and realizing that we really need to invest our resources and our time in not just getting someone to do business with us, but getting them to continue to do business with us over and over and over again. And there's this notion of repeat business. And especially in the promotional marketing industry, we love our repeat customers for things like setup charges being less, and the amount of product research that we need to do is decreased because we've gotten the customer kind of accustomed to what it is that we're going to show them. So this is a very promo-centric idea of being customer focused. And for many of the businesses that have historically been successful in the promotional marketing industry, if you go to their website, this is really what you hear and see from them, is that we're customer focused and we're customer centric. And we really want to make sure that we focus our attention on customers, customers, customers. And that worked really, really well until about the Great Recession. And Ted Levitt had said the purpose of a business is to create and keep a customer, but then the Great Recession happened. And that really started to push a move in around 2010 to focusing on employees. And what we realize is it's really challenging to get repeat business if we have unhappy employees who are answering the phone. And if they're not treating people well, the likelihood of them wanting to continue to do business with us is going to be decreased. So we saw this transition towards people starting to spend more time devoting time, energy, and resources to their employee base in the hopes that happy employees would lead to happy customers. And in that process, you know, we heard Ted Koine say things like, you really just can't have those. They're not mutually exclusive. You have to have both of those things in order for that to occur. And so what we've really seen now is what we're seeing is what we think is this movement to a 4.0, which is this idea of if we're here for a shared objective that is larger than all of us, it has this way of creating cohesion, both amongst our employees and our clients, because what we're saying is, this is what we believe in, this is what we stand for, this is what we're all about. And in the internet era, when frictionless transactions fueled by things like Amazon have made it really easy for people to make buying choices, we have to do something to create that additional value for those customers who could choose that frictionless transaction to say, you know what, I'm just going to sidestep that in this instance, and I'm going to continue to do business with you because we're part of a higher shared objective here, and I want to support you in your efforts to try to accomplish that. So we're really seeing that happen. And Simon Sinek in his book, Start With Why, is a really great example of how you can get yourself started on this path if it's something that you're interested in doing, because the results are pretty significant. This is not a feel-good thing. There are studies, including the one done by the Harvard Business Review, that suggest that businesses that are aligned on purpose have a tendency to outperform their marketplace by a factor of 10x. And Stan would tell you, if he was at this presentation, that he's even seen in some of his research multiples of that are as high as 16 times return over your competition in the marketplace when you're able to credibly and capably state what it is that your business is all about and why you do what you do. So this is not a feel-good thing. These are hard dollars and cents that you can actually accomplish. So let's break down some of the elements. First and foremost, why on earth are we talking about a goldfish, right? So let's talk about Goldfish specifically. So Goldfish was inspired by this hotel chain called Kimpton. And Kimpton is a really, really cool chain of of hotels that focus on hospitality centered around the experience for their guests. And they do things like free gourmet coffee, full-blown wine tastings in the lobby every evening, pet friendly. You can bring your pet into the resort, and they have consistently and repeatedly outperformed their marketplace. And it was this Guppy Love program that really kicked things off for them. And it was, if you were lonely and you wanted a little companionship, they had goldfish bowls that you could take up to your room to provide you that little extra sense of belonging and comfort. And it was their way of showing you that they really cared about you as an organization or as a business person. And Stan, his first pet was a goldfish. So that really spoke to him. And the interesting thing about goldfish is they're such a unique creature in that the average goldfish really only grows to the size of about 3 inches. And yet The world record holder for goldfish size is a whopping 20 inches. That's a 6x performance over the average goldfish. And if you start to break that down and examine, how is that even possible? Stan, in his research, was able to examine and realize that there are about 5 key factors that really go into determining what the size of your average goldfish is going to be. So let's examine those one by one. So the first one is actually the size of the bowl. So the smaller the bowl, obviously the less the goldfish can grow. So bigger the bowl, the bigger the opportunity for that fish to grow. And if we consider that as an allegory for business, we would equate that to the size of the marketplace that you're dealing with. So promotional marketing industry in the United States is about a $25 billion marketplace in 2019. We'll see how the 2020 numbers shake out given the pandemic, but we have a pretty sizable bowl. Now, the next factor in this is the amount of other goldfish in the bowl. So one would consider, obviously, as a business factor when we talk about the other goldfish, that equates to your competition. How many other people are there in your market who do the things that you do? Because if the market is crowded, then your opportunity for growth will be stunted. So the size of the bowl, the number of goldfish in the marketplace, obviously the quality of the water. If you don't have an owner who's willing to be diligent and change the water sufficiently well and often enough to give you that opportunity to have a really quality environment, it's going to impact your ability to grow. We equate that to the economy, and boy, have we been witness to some really poor water here over the course of the last 18 months, especially in the United States. So obviously the quality of the economy will factor into your ability to grow as a business. It certainly has done that for me. How long you've been in business often is another key factor in your growth. So if you're in your first 120 days, when you're in your startup phase, it's really important for us to be able to give you the best opportunity for success in those first 120 days. So that's your startup phase. We're a relatively mature marketplace, and there's not a tremendous amount of new entrants into the promotional products industry, either on the supplier side or the distributor side. So most of us are past this stage of things, so we don't really have much opportunity to affect that. And then lastly, and perhaps most importantly, it's the genetic makeup of each of those individual goldfish that give it the best opportunity for success. And we really like to equate that to your differentiation strategy. So when you factor those 5 things into what's going on, I'm sure you're thinking about your own business and what's going on in your own marketplace with respect to those 5 things as you're trying to consider what it is that's going on for yourself. But really, if you think about it, there's very few of those things that you can control, right? Because you really can't control the marketplace. You really have very little opportunity to control your competition. What we've learned is none of us have real opportunity to control the economy. So then really all that's left for us is this differentiation strategy. And it's what we call standing out in the sea of sameness. If you're in an environment where you're not able to reliably and ably communicate to the person that you're trying to sell to what it is that makes you different from the other people in the marketplace, and if Amazon or other e-commerce enabled participants are able to provide a more frictionless transaction, then your opportunity to really grow is incredibly impacted. And so we want you to feel confident about the fact that there are things that you can control in differentiation that really are some of the most important parts of what you can do in order to give yourself that chance at growth. But before we get to the rest of this, let's examine why we have colors. So the original 3 colors of the goldfish series were the 3 colors that comprise this amazing area of the United States called New Orleans, and this amazing celebration called Mardi Gras. That is just this incredible celebration of all things in Creole culture. And one of the things that the Creole culture does is focuses on something called surprise and delight. And Mark Twain, as a matter of fact, told us in his writing that he loved this concept so much, this word that's called Lagniappe, that it's worth traveling all the way to New Orleans for. And Lagniappe really is the cornerstone
excellent word
of, as he's speaking here, we'll skip past that one in the interest of time. So Lagniappe is really this idea of giving something a little bit extra. to respect and admire the client for choosing you over the other obvious choices that are available to he or she in the moment when they're making a buying decision. For those of you who've been to New Orleans, one of the really tasty treats that you can buy in the bakeries there is this little fluffy, light, delightful biscuit called a beignet. And if you go to a baker in New Orleans and you order a dozen of them, you will always get 13. And it is really that concept that I'm going to give you something you didn't ask me for as a means by which to honor that transaction. That really is the foundational aspect of Lagniappe. And it really was the cornerstone of what Stan decided was going to be the reason why he wanted to write this series of books. Because oftentimes in business, what a lot of business owners will focus on is trying to come up with big ideas and big concepts and things that are very difficult and time consuming and expensive to implement, when in reality, by focusing on the small things, you can really create this user experience for the people who are going to do business with you that you can point to and say, this is what makes us different. This is our genetic makeup. This is our Lagniappe. This is the thing that when everything else is exactly the same, that we would point to say, here's why you should do business with us. So why RED, right? So we're going to get to this, but I'm a big music guy. For those of you who know me well, Danny and I have spent our lives traveling around the country, figuring out ways to hang out with one another so that we can go see some of our favorite bands. And it was Bono from the UK group U2 who really focused on this RED campaign with Bobby Shriver. Bono was trying to raise awareness to the AIDS epidemic in sub-Saharan Africa, and he went to a number of different retailers and said, would you assist me by creating a product from your line that is dedicated specifically to the color red? And will you help me by donating the proceeds from the sale of these red-based items to my cause? And to date, I haven't checked the most recent numbers, but the last time that we checked it, there was about $500 million by way of this campaign through the retailers that you're seeing here that they've been able to raise, when the previous year they had raised about $500,000 before Bono decided that he wanted to get involved and do something. So just a tremendous leap forward in what was capable in AIDS research as a result of what Bono was able to accomplish by way of this RED campaign. And it really inspired me by virtue of when Stan had written the original Red Goldfish book with Graham Newell, where they talked about all the purpose-based businesses that they were able to document in their research and all the case studies that were in this book. When I was given the signed copy of it that I could show you by Stan because of the introduction that I got from Danny, it really inspired me to want to go and try to find those businesses as well within the Promo Cares movement so that we could tell a similar story and really start to highlight the amazing work that was being done using the promotional marketing medium as a superpower for social good. And it was in that process of me getting to meet Stan and us having these discussions about what Danny and I were doing with Promo Cares that Stan actually said to me, Roger, I think there's a book here. So would you be willing to work on the project with me? To which I enthusiastically said yes. And so now we have over 300 case studies of businesses in the promotional marketing industry who have done something like this. And it is a living document that if any of you are interested in getting access to this, I'm willing to share it with any and all of you so that you can really, if there's a little bit of cynicism or a little bit of skepticism on your part about whether or not this is actually true, I can put my money where my mouth is because we have the list and it exists today. And it was in the aggregation of all of those stories that we were able to develop some themes. So for those of you who are interested in considering the ways that you might, for your own businesses, want to do something similar, really what we've done with Red Goldfish Promo Edition is to give you an encapsulation of what our research showed in those 300 examples. And what we were able to determine is that there are really 5 enormously great categories in which the work that those businesses have done fall into. Here they are. There are a lot of buy one, give some initiatives amongst the factories in the promotional marketing industry. And there are countless examples of, if you could convince a client to buy a specific product, you can then explain to them what give back is going to happen at the factory level as a result of the purchase that they've made. There are businesses who are employing people from underserved communities in ways that are really just heartwarming and amazing stories of the ways that these people are offering a hand up to underserved communities in ways that are really, really inspiring. Clearly, we're all focused these days on ways to protect Mother Earth. This is Earth Month, and there is just a litany of stories that are growing almost daily of ways that factories in our space are trying to improve their impact on the environment, because obviously we're very plastic centric, and the idea of brand fill, product going directly from the distributor to the end buyer to the recipient to the landfill, hurts my heart. So we're really, really focused on trying to highlight stories of ways around that whole problem. There's a tremendous amount of fundraising that goes on for nonprofits through the use of promotional marketing items. And there's an amazing chapter in there about the ways that we were able to highlight how that gets done. And then lastly, the way that most of this ultimately results in is ways that we as businesses in this space need to be able to report and share what it is that we're doing in a way that is very transparent, so that we can show how we're achieving on the goals that we're stating we're trying to achieve. And then so here's some stories, some examples of some businesses. So if those of you who are aware of some of these factories in the industry, here's just 3 examples. Hirsch Gift and Peerless are both suppliers. The Dunstan Group is a distributor who does just an amazing job. They're all covered in the book. They're all covered in promo cares, so you can read those stories. But for me, the really amazing one here is Basecamp and Sweden USA's program with Dan Nevins and the Wounded Warrior Project, and what they've been able to accomplish. It's just an incredibly tremendous story. I would really, really recommend you spending some time learning more about Sweden and what they've been able to do with the Basecamp line. They actually have put that product line in Target now, and they're giving away $100,000 plus every single year to this effort in the name of Dan Nevins and the Wounded Warrior Project. It's just amazing. We have, like I said, these diversity and inclusion categories. Naughty Tie is an amazing business in the Denver, Colorado area, HHP Lift, Impact with Purpose, but it really is Spectrum Designs Foundation in New York, who is employing kids on the autism spectrum in their screen printing and decoration facility. Tim Howe and Patrick Bardsley and the work that they're doing with the Spectrum Foundation has spawned 3 businesses, including the screen printing business. They just opened their 2nd factory. I was just emailing with Tim today, celebrating with him the growth of their business model. And it's a really, really awe-inspiring story, one that I would strongly recommend that you spend some time with. This brand fill picture here just absolutely tears at me. The idea of the fact that the things that we make ultimately create situations like the one that you're seeing there. It just hurts me to no end. And we have businesses like Media Tree and the Akron line and Vantage Apparel that are trying to counteract some of what's going on in what you see there. But the shining example is All Made Apparel. They are actually employing young adults who ultimately would have gone into orphanages in places like Haiti and Honduras and India, and giving them a living wage so that they can break the cycle of poverty in those areas and keep those economic orphans out of that system in a way that will benefit those local communities. And their partnership now with Sanmar allows more of us in the promotional marketing industry to continue to be able to sell this product line. I know the people behind this project personally. I'm desperate to go on one of their trips to Haiti, to the original factory where they started this thing out before it started to really take off. And I've seen the footage of the participants and the ways that this has moved them. So I know that there's a great opportunity for us here to be able to tie the story of what happens when an all-made t-shirt gets purchased, as opposed to, say, one that maybe doesn't have necessarily the same impact that I won't name by brand. Experiential. Almost all of my board members on the Promo Cares board all throw some kind of fundraiser that raises millions of dollars for the organizations that they are trying to assist. And it really is a shining example of the ways that promotional marketing items can create a memory, a commemorative, something that I, as the participant in that event, can walk away with as a reminder of how good I feel about what I did in that moment. And if you, like me, like to surround yourself with people who are doing inspiring things, this chapter will absolutely get you excited about what you might also be able to accomplish in your own efforts if you decided that that's what you wanted to do. And I too, in social good promotions, we are after that same thing, trying to bring resources to nonprofit organizations by way of shared fundraising so that we can help them in their mission. Because the one thing that we know about nonprofits, the two things we know about nonprofits, is they don't usually have the kind of money they need from a resources perspective, and they're very bad marketers. So if we can bring some of our expertise and the products that we can bring to bear to help them with their mission, they are incredibly grateful, and it's incredibly gratifying to us in our ability to be able to create that commemorative for them in a way that's going to extend their brands beyond just that moment in time. That chapter, when I'm feeling bad about myself, that's the one that I go back to and read again to inspire myself to keep doing the hard work that's necessary to make sure that those nonprofits continue to be funded in a way that they deserve. There's a great example here of the concert that Danny throws by way of his Band Together North Carolina nonprofit. I don't know if you can see it there, but that's $1 million that they gave away on a routine basis year in and year out to a brand new, different nonprofit in the Triangle area of North Carolina. I am there every single year. I'm getting goosebumps just talking to you about it because it's so incredibly exciting to be a part of. And look how much people are having a great time. Obviously, this was 2019. Actually, this check is from 2018. The last in-person event was held in 2019. But in the book, we talk about the ways that all of those businesses were able, or those nonprofits were able to still work with these organizations to create virtual events and to leverage that fundraising into a pandemic environment and still be able to create a memory for folks, even though we couldn't physically be together. But we're all so desperate, as I'm sure you are as well, to get back to these days where we can do this in the way that we're accustomed to, because I miss it terribly, and I'm guessing that you do too. And then lastly, as we mentioned, by being able to state what it is that you intend to accomplish and then measure yourself against those objectives and be willing to publish reports that suggest where you're doing well and where maybe you've not quite hit the mark yet. Really what you're doing is you're demonstrating to the people who are looking for this part of what you do in a way that is going to stand the test of time, when after you've had a conversation with a prospect, they're going to go back and want to see if what you said is really who you are. And if you're not giving them ways to find that information, what you're really doing is you're creating dissonance, which is this belief that if you don't understand where you are in the trust index with that person at that moment, then you're not really giving them the opportunity to see the things that they're going to need to see from you in order to be able to do the research independent of the time that they spend in your presence. Because if you've done a good job, they're going to go do this and there's no stopping them. So it's imperative that you put together the information and you present it in a way that's findable, in a way that's shareable, in a way that's meaningful. And if you can do it and you can do it well, you can actually start to see evidence on the part of the prospect or your client that suggests that you're moving up this continuum from what can be a weak relationship to something more close to Ohana. Because here's what we saw during the pandemic. If you were trying to sell to someone who was struggling with a loved one who was challenged with COVID, that was a very hostile encounter. And what it suggested to that person was that they had not established the level of trust necessary for you to be in that moment to have that conversation with them. And it got to be where what maybe would have been seen as a slightly intrusive but forgivable stub of your toe now is like a black eye, or maybe even a black mark, where they're going out on social media and saying bad things about businesses. I think we've all seen examples of this, where attempts to try to position ourselves as being warm and fuzzy when we've done things in the past that clearly are not a reflection of what we're trying to present ourselves as in this moment, had a way of blowing up in ways that maybe hadn't happened before. In America, that's called a woke culture. And this whole idea of if you try to ride the wave of the moment and try to position yourselves as being something you're not, it's not just distasteful, it's actually an opportunity for you to really create a black mark for yourself that you may not be able to recover from. So in the book, we teach exercises in the back half of the book that you can use to actually work on those 5 categories. Because here's what I would say to you. If any one of the 5 of those categories speak to you, then that's probably where you should get started. And if you can involve your employees in the discussion, even better. Because remember, we said way back in the beginning of the conversation that 86% of your employees will stick around, and maybe even for less money, if they're aware of what it is that the company is there to do from a higher purpose perspective. Now you're on your way. So if you can't really do that with your employees, or maybe if you're like me, we're a relatively small business, we don't have a lot of employees to engage in this discussion, you should definitely start by developing your purpose statement, which is trying to figure out what it is about those 5 categories that really speak to you and your company. And what we find oftentimes is if you just sit down and think about it in this context, more often than not, there's something that you're already doing that you're really not even aware of because you've not thought of it in this context. And it can be something as simple as perhaps your business is close to a municipal park, and maybe that park is not very well kept because there's not enough resources at a local level for whomever is responsible for doing that to keep up with it. And if you adopted a once a month cleanup where you spent time trying to make that park a nicer place, that's kind of in the sustainability category. And if that speaks to you, then maybe there's ways for you to continue to evolve what you do in that category, because what you've demonstrated is, by way of not even really realizing it, you now recognize that, oh my gosh, that really is important to me. And I really should be communicating that, because maybe that would be the difference between somebody wanting to choose you versus one of your crosstown competitors because they were able to see the pictures on Instagram from your social cleanup day of the park. So by doing that, you're giving your prospects the opportunity to see that that's important to you. And then by communicating that information to your employees, you're really giving them the chance to figure So, are we good? Everyone still hearing us?
You there, Roger?
Yeah.
Ah, perfect. Sorry, I think it might have just dropped out a little bit at the end.
Yeah. So I wrapped up by saying that, obviously those 5 categories, you can examine your own business. And what we find oftentimes is that there are things that many business people are already doing that fall into one of those categories. And that there's something within what you do already that speaks to one of those 5 categories. That's a really great place to continue to grow and try to expand what it is you're already doing, because a lot of times business owners and their employees are doing these things unconsciously. And what we're saying is, if that's happening for you now, what a great way to grow that and continue to expand upon that, because those are the things that your clients and your prospects really want to know about.
Excellent. Lovely. Thank you for repeating that.
Absolutely. So I wanted to open it up to questions and see if there's any questions or comments or any thoughts from amongst the group. And before I got one last story, but I'm going to keep it in my hip pocket and we'll answer a couple questions and then I'll get to it.
To kickstart the Q&A session, how about we start with, how did the pandemic factor into the creation of the book?
Oh boy. So if you can imagine, the book was originally slated for release in May of 2020. And it had nothing in it about the pandemic at all, because there's a period of time from when you finish the book to when it gets published where it's kind of out of your control and there's not much that you can do with it. So I got a phone call in late March from Stan, who point blank told me, we got to rewrite it. And I'm the kind of guy that when, let's say if I ran a marathon, I'm not running 2 marathons. Once I've ran a marathon, that's over and I'm on to the next challenge. It was incredibly, incredibly challenging to pull the book apart and try to figure out, how can I make the story be relevant in the COVID era? And actually, we went from 250 examples prior to the pandemic. We reopened our research and we came up with almost 70 more. And we were able to take the COVID related research we did and marry it into every one of those 5 categories, because there were literally things going on within the industry, like factories reimagining their production so that they could make PPE, or distributors who were going out and creating no profit mask sales to first responders, because the traditional healthcare supply chain in America could not keep up with the demand. So we were able to use some of the factories that historically have been dedicated to other textiles to actually be part of the early solution when the pandemic first hit. It was really interesting to watch. And I would say in retrospect, it actually made the book a lot better.
And so what's happened since the book release?
Boy, nothing like a change in socioeconomic conditions and furloughs and layoffs and all of the things that we witnessed here in America with respect to what happened while the pandemic was just raging in the middle part of last year, to really heighten awareness around what it is that businesses are all about. And what we've seen is just an explosion in the appetite for things like sustainability, environmental responsibility. Because people had more time on their hands, things that they maybe were paying less attention to prior to the pandemic suddenly really grew in importance to them. And so what we've seen now is what maybe had been a nice to have on the part of what it was that people are asking of us about what we do for a living has become a need to have. And for those of us who have been able to communicate that, I guess the best example I can give you, Ida, is we didn't, at Social Good Promotions, we had no sales, 0 sales in April and May of last year. We sold very little in the way of PPE, and we grew our business 86% in 2020.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
So what has been the marketplace reaction?
Promo cares, oftentimes in the early days, I would be greeted with sort of, I don't really get it. I'm not really like, I understand what you're saying and that sounds great, but what is it really? And what we were trying to explain to people in the early stages of it was, it's kind of like music. If you're drawn to music, some people want to play drums, other people want to play violin, some people want to play the piano, some people just want to sing. It's all music. So it's the way you interpret it is really up to your own situation, circumstances, all of those things. And because the marketplace is more interested, we're seeing suppliers constantly coming out with new campaigns and new ideas about the ways that they want to do things. We're seeing just an explosion in improved packaging with, less plastic involved in the shipment of things, or less tear weight. So it has a lower carbon footprint. I mean, when we first started all of this, it was relatively difficult for us to come up with the examples. But I would tell you, like, in what the places I get my news from, both in the industry and outside the industry, there are stories going on every single day now. And it's become increasingly easier to find things that you can point to say, like, this is a reflection of what we're talking about.
Thanks, Roger. And my last question is, where are we on the recognition spectrum for the types of businesses found in the book?
So I think we're going to reach a little bit of a tipping point. And I think you see it every now and again now, where a business will stub their toe. And you don't need to wait too long between when they stub their toe and when they get called out for it. So I think the continuum has a lot of room left in it, but it's imperative that, like, as I mentioned, as part of the discussion here, you know, developing that purpose statement and being able to create a way to show what we're talking about consistently and repeatedly over time is going to be really, really important for businesses if this is the strategy that they're going to want to try to adopt.
Thanks,
So
Roger. Yeah, no, that's a good one. We've just got another question that's come through. So one of the biggest changes I've seen COVID had an impact is a move to Australian-made products. And have you seen the same in the US? And is this another purpose origin?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. You know, I was concerned even before all of the pandemic happened about our industry's use of virgin plastic. So it was at least already on our mind about the possibility of, if legislation came along, to suggest that we probably should stop importing plastic-made items from Asia, that we better figure out an alternative supply chain that we could point to, plastic or not, that we could say, all right, well, if that's something that you're not really interested in putting your logo on, then let us have an alternative solution for you. So if it's USA made, or if it's, you know, zero plastic campaign, where we've literally had customers come to us and say, I do not want my logo on anything plastic. So by creating these alternative supply chains built around strategies that are specific to what you're talking about, absolutely. And if that's the kind of business that you are, and if that speaks to you, and if you can create that opportunity, and more importantly, if that's what you believe in, when someone comes to you with a project, you should definitely lead with a product set that is Australian produced, and then make the customer fight you for reasons why they don't want to do that. Because if that's part of your brand, and you've stated that in everything that you're communicating to a client, and then they come and try to argue with you about whether or not that's what they want to do, then maybe that's not really the right client for you, right? Maybe that you'd be better served just letting that person move on and spending your time trying to find the people who actually agree with what you agree with. And that is absolutely a way for you to be able to show what it is that you stand for. And absolutely, that's a brand value for sure.
Thanks, Roger. And thank you to all the other participants that submitted questions throughout this segment. Over the coming days, you will receive a follow-up email with a link to view today's recording, along with the PowerPoint presentation and other relevant information. I will also include Roger's email address as part of this email, should you wish to contact him, should you have any other further questions.
Because now we do have a little bit, I got to work my way through it. So this is why we need to make sure that you guys send me your email address, because if you email me at roger@socialgoodpromotions and say, I caught your presentation, I really would like to read more, I will give you a code that you can go redeem for a free digital version of the book. And we'd be more than happy to share that with you as our Lagniappe opportunity, our little bit of surprise and delight for all of you for taking the time out of your morning to spend some time with me, listening to me drone on about why purpose is important and why it's such a competitive differentiator. Thank
you, Roger, for that generous gift to our members. I'm sure we'll have a few participants that will snap you up for that. So on behalf of Roger Burnett and APPA, thank you for all our participants in joining us today, and I hope you all have a great afternoon, and I hope you have a great evening, Roger, and thank you once again.
Thank you.
Take care.